Okay, you're wondering if there's any legal argument for this. School district is not requiring masks. I just did one on masks, the prior question. So let's get into this. And I don't feel safe sending your son to school with no precautions in place. And I'm going to stop you there because you can't say no precautions in place because that's just not the case. All right. Every school still has their COVID protocols and they still have all of that stuff in place from last year. I don't know what school you're in, so I don't know the level of money, but there was devoted money last summer for COVID relief and in order to update and help schools, not only on the technological side, but also with air systems and things of that nature. Now, whether your school actually used the money in that way, I don't know. I don't know. Those are the questions you're going to need to ask. But when you say you don't feel safe sending your son with no precautions in place, that's just not, see, that's a blanket generalization, and that's just not the case. Schools have protocols. They are following those protocols. Whether it's a masking school or it's a non-masking school, they are following the other protocols. You just sort of have to define what those are. And I'm not saying that you don't feel safe. That's how you feel. I got that, but I just wanted to stop there. They aren't even providing a single classroom with mask requirements for medically fragile children. I have medically fragile children that I represent that can't wear masks. So I understand what you're saying, that there's going to be kids on both ends of this. I absolutely agree with you. There are kids that are in those situations that deserve in-person learning. They need in-person learning. They're not virtual learners, and they need a location in order to receive these services. And so at that point, if I read the rest of it correct, and I'm not, as far as the one minor study and all of that other stuff, I get what you're saying. I have an autistic child. I get what you're saying with regards to some of the comorbid things that go with autism, and I also understand about what the government does with regards to triaging people if we get to that point. And my daughter would fall down from the priority to down here. They won't tell you that. But if you look, guys, they did not get away with their little triage thing that was exposed last year, that children with disabilities, if it came to the point where we had to start rationing healthcare, they would fall down the list of other people would get a priority. But that's also true with elderly people. They would fall down on the list if we were in truly that triage system, which we never got last year. I think the media was really hyping it, but we never even filled a single overflow tent or one of those hospital ships. So we did just fine with what we had at the height of at the COVID response last year. All right. But I'm just saying I do appreciate what you're citing because my child also has some other issues along with her autism, and yes, that's a concern for me. But see, she can't wear a mask, won't wear one, and she needs in-person services. She's not a virtual learner. So, but in your situation, I completely agree that your child needs a safe place to receive in-person services. So how do we achieve that? That's the argument to make. How do you achieve that? Because as I've said in multiple prior videos, the standard is a reasonableness standard. All right? So you can't sit there and dictate that everybody has to do it a certain way. I don't agree with some of these people that believe that you can use disability rights law to sit there and force everybody to wear a mask. I don't agree with that. I don't believe you can. I don't believe you should. I don't believe that you should use these laws in order to, as some kind of hammer for some temporary solution that you like for yourself. That stuff works in the wrong way as well. And I always warn people, you can sit there and make bad law that ends up being used against you at some later time and in some later scenario. I feel that way about terrorism laws after 9/11. They're now being used against citizens. The government doesn't, sit there and pick and choose, well, we're going to stop this, because that threat no longer exists. No, they have that apparatus. They're going to start using it against somebody else. And that somebody else is typically you, sometime, at some point. So, you sit there and you want to play with disability rights law. I just think it's dangerous to do that. We have a reasonableness standard for a reason. So think through the problem. How do we achieve that to where it works for your child? Do I think that a school within that reasonableness standard, being that we learned so much over the past year and there's additional funding for that, can create a single classroom or a couple classrooms that have, just like hospitals, different air systems to where the different air systems could super filter the air. They can work on airflow. See, that has more of an impact scientifically. That has more of an impact with regards to transmission rates than mask wearing. There's just no science behind that, legitimately, And I know some of you were going to want to argue with me about it. You can argue with me all day long, but there's plenty of documentation out there to support the fact that there's been a minuscule impact with regards to mask wearing. Minuscule to the point where it just doesn't justify that, as especially with how small the coronavirus is. That there's nothing, with regards to these cloth, you can get right through a cloth mask, paper mask. So if that's the case, and that is the case, then what do we do? Well, we get rid of those barriers, because that will impede airflow, because you need airflow to sit there and break apart these really small viral particles that are out there that could take days to fall because it's not heavy enough, so it just stays up there. What you don't want it for it to concentrate because of bad airflow, and they're finding out that those barriers will impede airflow. You have more air from the outside, coming in to sit there and constantly. You sit there and you have good filtration systems. They're even talking about the germicidal UV rays to kill COVID. So is it reasonable for a school to potentially outfit one or two classes for the students that would meet that criteria? In my viewpoint, that's what the federal money was for. That is what a Board of Education needs to be approached with. That should be a consideration that I think is within the reasonableness standard for your child. Now, what do you do, be in between that time? Well, you need to have those discussions about airflow, and if they need to add fans in there and to blow in outside air, have the windows open, because that is shown to be of great benefit. More spacing, to have a devoted classroom. If they need to bring in one of those remote units that is separate from the main school, they could do that as well. I don't find any of those things unreasonable in the situation we're in today, and I don't think a judge would disagree with that, especially with the amount of money that the schools received in order to address those concerns. So yes, I do believe that those things are reasonable. Those things should be made available to families like yours that have concerns and considerations, because there's also, even with one minor study, there's going to be other classmates that are in the same situation with far more studies to back up the need for that. So you're not alone. It's just finding out who those like-minded parents are. And then instead of pushing for some mass, everybody has to do it this way for my child, you need to sit there and go, well, what can they do to hit that reasonableness standard? Because making everyone do it your way, that's not reasonable. That's not reasonable, because I got clients that can't do it that way. That's unreasonable. So what is it that they can do that is reasonable? And I just brought up all of those different variations that would work, that can work, that they can do.